obviously, thank you for coming to the Midwest Finesse seminar here. I'm Austin Applegate, and this is Tony, and we're co-directors for the Kansas Kayak Anglers. If you've ever heard of us before or not, but we do tournaments out of a kayak. And we obviously all just fish together for fun for the most part. So you'll see the hats and the shirts and things like that. So anyways, the Great Blue Heron, obviously thank you guys for hosting us. Bob is kind of the owner, I believe, right?
Yes.
I don't know, is it Marshall? Last name?
Bob
Bob Marsh. So obviously thank you to GBH is what I call them, Great Blue Heron. Obviously you can see the fly fishing. They got various paddle sports here. I don't know if they have kayaks yet, but they have canoes, I know. And they have some finesse stuff on the wall, obviously, which is what you guys are here for. So, and then they have the coffee and the tea. So, and then yeah, Kansas Kayak Anglers. Obviously, our main mission here is just to promote and inspire fishing, education, and conservation in the state of Kansas, just in a really more of a friendly and community-oriented way. Some people are competitive, but most of us are out there for fun. It's nowhere near the same as competition of a boat. We do not care that much. It is not big money. So we're there for fun and to learn. We are a volunteer run organization founded in 2022. There was a conglomerate of other clubs. We have the Northeast Kansas Kayak Anglers, Southeast Kansas Kayak Anglers, just throughout the state, and we ended up combining everything so that we could obviously increase our presence and just our numbers. And yeah, we host catch, photo, release kayak tournaments. We have various tournaments. If that's something you ever have any interest in getting into, we have people that are more than happy to give you a kayak to just test out, honestly. Like, just meet us at a lake and we'll take you out. The catch, photo, release is kind of unique because it's using a measuring board, and you take a photo, you submit it on your phone to an app, and it's judged there, and the judges can see the location, the time, everything that you submitted that photo. And also there's an identifier for that day. So that's how that's just all done. And then there's tournaments that are in person, tournaments that are monthly online for fun throughout the state of Kansas. So, but yeah, you can check everything else out on KansasKayakAnglers.com there. We have a little website. So the reason you're here to really listen to these guys, Ned Kehde, the Godfather of Finesse, the one and only Ned Rig Master. He gives all the credit to Chuck Woods, which you're going to hear about that here in a second, but I'll hand it over to him. So.
Okay.
Welcome, Ned.
Thank you. What we're going to deal with today, with the so-called Ned Rig. And this happened a number of years ago when my friend Steve Quinn, who works for In Fisherman magazine, I used to work for In Fisherman for a number of years, about 1980 to 2020, and he called the 2.5-inch Strike King company's tickler Zero. That's the Zero. Let's see here. This is the Zero. It was made. I'll just let you pass it around. This is the Zero. It's made by Strike King, but Lucky Strike was the first people to Strike King Lure was the first people to sell it, and we cut it 2.5 inches length, and we stuck it on a Gopher jig. Gopher was a jig company up in Brainerd, Minnesota, and it was a mushroom style head, and it became the heart of Midwest finesse fishing for us. Before the Zero comes out. And then we fish with a thing called the Finesse Jig that's made by Z-Man, and the Finesse Jig is a minnow shake bait, and he called this the Ned Rig too. And let me see if I can pass one of those around for you. This is the Finesse Jig. And so that's how the Ned Rig got started. And it really, that was just about 15 years ago. And then after that, Stacy King, who was from Table Rock Lake in Missouri, came up. We did a TV show for Bass Pro Shops. It was on December 10th, 2010, and we fished in the lake in Kansas City, Gardner City Lake, and it was December 10th. The water temperature was 38, 39, surface temperature was 38, 39 degrees. The back third of the lake was ice covered, and we caught 33 bass in 3 hours and 40 minutes. Stacy said that was the quickest he ever made a TV show in his life. And we made him fishing on a rain minnow, which is now called the Z-Man TR Minnow Z. And I'll show you what.
How long were the episodes? I'm guessing. Is that?
Those were half-hour shows.
Half-hour shows.
Half-hour shows, and so it usually took them 2.5 to 3 days to make a half. And then the episode was maybe 20 minutes because it was commercial time, some other introduction stuff like that. So that was the second time within that year that it got some national things, called Midwest Finesse or the so-called Ned Rig. So. And I'm going to give you now here are 12 people, historically speaking, that made a big part of this thing that started back in 1956, okay? The Ned Rigs go back that far. And I was, 1956, I was 16 years old, so I wasn't even really part of that whole seminar. Here's a list of these people. And one is Burton Bosley. He's still alive. He now lives in West Virginia, and he's a heck of a smallmouth fisherman. And he uses what I call the Chuck Woods rig, which is the Ned Rig, and he's still using it on all the rivers of West Virginia. And the next guy, of course, is Chuck Woods. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. He was a house painter, and this is a regular painter. He lived in Kansas City, and. Does anybody remember Harold Inslee here? Harold Inslee called Chuck Woods the best fisherman he ever knew. And the next one is Harold Inslee. He ran a TV show in Kansas City called The Sportsman's Friend for 1950s until he died almost in the late 1990s. And the next guy is Ray Fink on Southwest Boulevard in Kansas City and Wyandotte County. He had a thing called Fink's Tackle Shop, and it was the first bass tournament, the bass club type thing in the history of before Bassmaster and all those things started having bass clubs. It was the very first one in the 1950s, and people would come in there, and on Tuesday nights when the shop was open till 9 o'clock. Sit around like yeah, wait. I heard they were practicing yesterday, so I was even taking a nap. Wow. But Ray Fink has played a major role in all of this. None of these guys are still alive. The Gray's Tackle Shop is where we all hung out, and it's on Southwest Boulevard down near Johnson Drive. And it was really, it was a great tackle shop. Now Bass Pro Shop has taken over all that stuff. All these small shops are really struggling, but that was way before the Bass Pro Shop stuff was happening. And the next guy is Ted Green. Ted Green owns Marlin Lure Company in Blue Springs, Missouri. That's out where the Kansas City Chiefs and the Kansas City Royals play. Blue Springs is. And he had Marlin Lure Company, and which made a couple of baits we're going to talk about is the Reaper, the Reaper and the Puddle Jumper, and they created the first jig worm in the history of jig worm fishing. They bought in 1955. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. And the next guy is Brett Hall. He was from Forsyth, Missouri, and in the Roadrunner, the Marabou jig with the underspin. Mm-hmm. It really changed all the fishing, especially down in the Ozarks, but then all over the United States. The Roadrunner is still and
So,
underspin.
crappie fishing.
Yeah, underspin, and bass fishing too.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, the first Bassmaster Classic was out in Lake Mead, and one of the participants out there was from Forsyth, Missouri, which was close to where this place was made, and he caught all of his fish at the Classic on the road. And that was the first time taking Midwest finesse baits out to the West.
Yeah.
You know, the West Coast people think they created finesse fishing, but the first time they ever caught a fish on a Roadrunner was on an 1/8-ounce Roadrunner out in Lake Mead, you know, in Nevada. So it's this whole gist of this kind of presentation is that Kansas City was the heart of finesse fishing before it got to Japan, or before it got to California and Arizona and California. And the next guy's name is Kehde, and Kehde grew up in the Lake of the Ozarks area. He won a Bassmaster Classic in 1979, and he won the Angler of the Year in '78 and '80, and he then competed in the FLW tournament. He won a number of bass tournaments through his career. And his son came along, and his grandson came along, and then in the 20 teens, it was, you know, it's so expensive. And trying to have 3 guys fish the tournament, they just went under. And then Dion won the FLW championship and the Bassmaster champion, Angler of the Year, and he was the first guy to do that. And most of the time they fished Midwest finesse, not all the time, but most of the time. And the next guy is a guy named Dwight Kiefer. He's still alive. He lives in Kansas still. He lives down in Parsons. And Dwight went to KU. When he was going to KU as a sophomore, he went up and won the freshwater championship, which Ted Williams and the journalist from Chicago, it was the first Bassmaster Classic, and he won it using one of Ray Fink's rods and a beetle spin. And we'll get that beetle spin, which is a few minutes more, and a plastic rod on a jig head. And he won that up in Wisconsin, and that was, you know, he was a sophomore at the University of Kansas, right up here where the flames were flying over. You know, so it was just. He's still fishing a little bit. He's about 80 years old. He is. And then there's Drew Reese. Drew's still alive too. Drew's actually right now fishing. He's living up in Ontario on the Lake of the Woods. He lives in Rantoul, Kansas, the rest of the year. And Drew is at the heart. He used to work for Ray Fink when he went to school in Johnson County in Kansas City, and Dwight Kiefer did too, Shawnee Mission High School. And Drew fished in the first Bassmaster Classic out at Lake Mead too, and he used Midwest finesse rigs. And we'll just kind of talk about the rods that Ray Fink made, and the lures that Chuck Woods made, and stuff like that. And he came in 7th place in the Classic that year. And the next guy named is Jim Rogers. Jim Rogers lived down on Lake Stockton in southern Missouri, and he was a big Midwest finesse fisherman. He won a number of Bassmaster Classics fishing jig worms and marabou jigs and hair jigs, and we'll show you one of the hair jigs he made. And one of his sons has a tackle shop in Liberty, Missouri right now, and it's really a pretty dynamic tackle shop. And competing with, you know, Cabela's, when Cabela's was there at Bass Pro Shop, so he does really a tremendous job, and it's a heck of a business. And then the last two are our sons and fathers, Bill Ward and Virgil Ward, and they ran Virgil Ward won the freshwater fishing championship 2 years, and and he also competed in a couple bass, Bassmaster tournaments in the very early years. He had a great TV show called Championship Fishing. And I forgot to say that Harold Inslee won the very first freshwater fishing classic in 1960 using a Midwest Finesse worm and jig head. And that was in 1960. And he had a TV show too, called The Sportsman's Friend. So those are the 12 guys that really started this thing way before the so-called Ned stuff started. This is I was just kind of a little tight, and Steve Quinn just called it the Ned Rig, and for some damn reason it stuck. And in a way you're kind of I'm embarrassed in a way, in some ways, well, it's kind of. But I'm more embarrassed than I am anything else. So here I'm going to give you kind of a history of 10 lures that really play a major role in how we fish. And the very first one is the Marabou jig. And I'm going to pass you around a remnant. This is the first. This is not the first one, but this is what came out of it. I'll take this off. And I got these, I would say these are from, oops. Let's leave that on. But this was from about 1970, I would say I got this, and it's still hanging around. And what happened was Virgil Ward and Harold Inslee used to be great friends, good friends. And Harold and Virgil were going to go down to the White River below Bull Shoals and make a TV show for Harold Inslee's Sportsman's Friend, which used to be on KCMO TV in Kansas City, and then throughout Oklahoma and part of Kansas, Wichita, Topeka, and places in Missouri. And Virgil said, "Bill, I want you to make me a marabou jig that looks like a streamer that all the fly fishermen are using down on the White River below Bull Shoals." So Billy doing it, he was 15 years old at the time or something, tied up a jig, a silver jig on an unpainted jig head. It was 16th ounce, and made the first marabou jig. It was 1956 or 57. Billy and I couldn't quite remember actually when it happened. Harold's dead, and so his son was not too good a shape, so we couldn't figure out what it was, but it's 56 or 57. So, and that became the heartbeat of what we did for many years. We used to put, when we were bass fishing with it, back there they put nothing on the back of it. Like you guys now, a lot of guys on their jigs are putting TRDs or other things on the back of your jigs head. But we used to put a little pork eel on it, about a 3 or 4 inch pork eel. Sometimes we cut it down to 2 inches on the black jig. We mainly use black, and so that was the the beginning of it. And in 1959, they went up to Canada to smallmouth bass fishing, and this is 1959, and they fished on a Crater Lake. This is a couple 20 miles above the Lake of the Woods, catching smallmouth bass. And Bill said he and his dad were fishing till their arms ached, till their arms ached. They had to quit because they were catching so many fish. And nowadays, you read in Fisherman magazine or Canadian magazines or online that the marabou jig, I guess it was Marty brought up his name, Gussie, who lives on the Lake of the Woods. They think those are the guys. There's 3 guys up there that really got to fishing really great with the marabou jig, and in the 1990s and in the 2000s, and they really got good. And they kind of all the tournament fishermen from up there fishing the Lake of the Woods and Mille Lacs lakes and all those lakes up there. They were winning tournaments by fishing the marabou jig, and they were credited with being the forefounders of the marabou jig, and this was, 30 years after Billy Ward made the first one for his dad. And by the time that this TV show got on the air for down in Oklahoma. There was in places like that. All of a sudden, people in Tulsa, companies down there, were starting manufacturing marabou jigs. You know, that's by 1960s. We had marabou jigs all over the world. You know, just hundreds and hundreds of them, and we could buy them for 12 cents and 15 cents. You know, I don't know how much you guys pay for this stuff now, but you know, how much of it?
$4 or $5. I would say.
$4 or $5, you know, so it's a great inflation measure with just what the heck, what marabou jigs are. So, okay, and the second one was even came a little bit before the marabou jig, and it was the jig worm. And the jig worm was first in our world, my world. The jig worm was the was really first used by Chuck Woods, and Chuck Woods is what we call this guy back here, this guy right here looking at me. He's a belly boat king right now, and Chuck Woods was the one that king of belly. He had the first belly boat, and it's an inner tube, you know, with a seat in it, and he was a master of it. He lived in the Kansas City, Missouri side, but he fished mainly over here in the Kansas side in the small lakes. And I think Chuck probably caught more bass than anybody in the history of Kansas. You know, it was, you know, because there weren't a heck of a lot of fishermen back days, and he was a master in it. And his big worm was a sportsman's floater, see, and they came in 6, 7, and 8 inches, and he was fishing on all different sizes, but he'd be fishing on a 16th ounce jig head, you know. And I mean, everybody knows what a jig worm was, but we're still using it today. We all fish today, and this jig worm was what, you know, we were all fishing. We were ready to just have a very casual, and we caught 52 fish. You know, we were 4 of us fishing, and we just
52 bass.
52 bass. Yeah, we got some channel.
Other stuff.
We got a couple, one channel cat and a flathead, and some green sunfish, and some
carp.
Oh wow, yeah,
They
Marty.
didn't catch the carp.
Well, we
Marty
had
likes
him
to
on.
say caught it.
We probably had him on for 5 minutes.
Boat slapper.
Yeah.
We had him for 5 minutes, didn't we?
We weren't going to get that in on whatever pound test you had on. We're going to lose that
Yeah,
one.
we had 5 minutes of carp fishing,
Yeah.
and it was the carp ran us out to the middle of the lake.
Marty and I were talking, and we would guesstimate somewhere, you know, over 60 fish total, to like 60 to 70-ish, would you say, something like
No,
that?
probably.
Total. Nope.
So, I mean, the jig worm is going to play a big role in how we develop a lot of our baits too. But the jig worm, in Marlin Lure Company, I said Ted Green and Harold Lindsley. Marlin Lure Company in 1955 bought a jig head from down a guy who made them down in Bull Shoals. Bull Shoals at that time was king of the world for catching largemouth bass. He bought this, and he was setting up his Marlin Lure Company, and he was selling what's called the shake worm and jig. It's SK worm, and with an N, jig, shake worm jig. So this was we always called the shaky head jig, you know now, and this was the beginning of the shaky head jig thing back in 1955, and everybody thinks now that, you know, that was starting in the 1990s or 1980s, sometime, the shaky head. 1955 was where it started. It started in Kansas City, Blue Springs, Missouri.
What was the company you said?
Marlin Lure Company, M-A-R-L-Y-N-N.
1955.
1955, yeah, the jig head. That's the first jig worm thing. And Harold Lindsley used that jig to win the the World Series American World Series of sport fishing.
It's pretty amazing how everything started kind of like in the Midwest like that.
Yeah, I mean, nobody, you know, there's a book here written by Michael Jones. It's called The Complete Guide to Finesse Fishing. And Michael insists on here that California started finesse fishing. That was part of it. I mean, those guys were very prominent in finesse fishing. You know, we just had guys like Gato Hibbs, and we're becoming so local guys that, you know, in California you got a lot more a lot more
Spread. You
Spread,
can,
yeah,
you can
yeah.
easily get the word out.
word out, you
Yeah.
know. And Kehde was a hillbilly, you know, down there, you know.
Probably didn't talk very much to people
No,
except
right.
the people he knew.
And he was a fishing guide, he was
Yeah.
a great
Yeah.
fishing guide, you know, so. And he didn't want to talk too much about it because he didn't want anybody else to know about it.
What dates were they saying in California? Like when were they saying, like, are you talking like
I don't know.
1970s, 1980s?
Yeah,
Like,
they don't have.
They don't have a date?
Yeah, 1990s and 1980s. you
Okay,
know.
so but I mean, that's still 20, 30 years.
Yeah, no,
20,
yeah, but
40 years later.
and Kehde, they interviewed Kehde in here, and you read it, and
Yeah,
Kehde
yeah.
said, yeah, we've been doing this many years before you guys ever started throwing this lightweight like stuff.
Yeah.
This guy he must have heard it because he quoted him in here, yeah. Yeah, Rick, Nick,
I was gonna ask, where does Charlie Brewer in Tennessee fall in the timeline?
Charlie Brewer comes up, I'll mention him here pretty soon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because Charlie Brewer's out of our district here, but you have to credit him because he was 1970s essentially,
Okay.
so it's not, we're not up there yet in timeline, but he comes in here. And he made, you know, his do nothing retrieve and his Tennessee handle rods and stuff like that play a role, you know. Tennessee handle rods actually came from here, essentially. But you know, in my mind, we could argue. Probably Charlie's son would argue with me immensely too. So I mean, we could be both right.
Yeah.
We could both be wrong too. So but I'm just telling you. Yeah, but, so and then here comes the big deal here. Let me see if I can get this out. When Chuck Woods was fishing his jig worms, you know, in his belly boat, in the worms, you know, they would fall apart. They're different than the Z-Man worms. Now he was fishing a sportsman's fatty floating worm, and on a jig head because it would be elevated and it would just shake and as it would be sinking. It was a neat little worm, and he would have at the end of the day, you know, 10 or so, 15, maybe 20. They're all wadded up in his pocket. Then he would go back to Fink's Tackle and he would just be messing around, sitting in there, cutting on worms and looking at worms and doing stuff. And he came up with this thing. I didn't have. I already.
There's a photo up top left there.
Oh, okay, great. This is it. This is the beagle. Oh, great. Oh, God, you guys got.
I took some
Hey.
notes when I was doing all my reading. That's the only photo of Chuck Woods right there.
This is Chuck Woods right here, guys.
Only known photo in existence.
Only known photo left.
Right there, the guy who invented a lot, right there.
Yeah, right here.
That's it.
He's come walking up from a.
Catching 300 fish.
Probably, maybe.
Yeah.
So he was fishing a rock quarry, a coal. What do you call it?
Are you talking about the strip pits?
Strip pits. Yeah. Great. You got an 85-year-old mine. I can't remember the names
You're
anymore.
doing great.
He was fishing strip pits down in central Kansas.
Wow.
He was just walking up the hill from here. And Bert Bosley took this photograph. He was the first guy I mentioned. Bert Bosley worked for Ray Fink, and then he left Kansas City. He was a saltwater guide all over the world, and just in Japan and China, and just all over, and then down in Florida, Panhandle all the way down to the Keys. So yeah, and this is the first. This is the first Chuck Woods. Hey,
I missed all the best parts too.
Oh no, we're just starting to get good.
We're getting started. Okay, so this is the first Ned Rig, okay? We call this the Chuck Rig. Everything that came after is the Chuck, okay? But for some damn reason we got it. We didn't know what we were doing. So, and then Bass Buster. Chuck went fishing with Virgil down on the Palm-de-Terre River, not the Palm River, on the Palm-de-Terre Lake, and because Virgil said, hell, this thing can't get fish. And these down where people fish, you know, you can make in the farm ponds and the community lakes around Kansas City and Lawrence and stuff, you can catch fish, but when you want to go down to the Ozarks, that thing can't fish. They went down there, man. Virgil said, man, this was something else. And so they started doing it. But they didn't pour them. What they did was what Chuck did. They would just take razor blades and make them out of worms. And when they go like the Kansas City Sports Show and stuff like that, Billy Ward, his son, who was in his teenage years, and his sister, when they were teenagers, they would sit at these tables and be cutting them out with a razor blade and selling them to people in packages, you know, for a nickel a piece. And they finally sold so many they started making them.
Would
You
you
know?
say he was just putting a ball-headed jig on it?
Ball-head jig, yeah. And eventually they made them in 1-inch to 6-inch size. And Virgil took one down the Twin River Bridges down in Oklahoma, in Grand Lake. And in Grand Lake, he was fishing that thing. He shot a TV show, and they didn't keep an exact count like we keep now on this stuff, but they caught, you know, close to a couple hundred fish on just a 3-inch beetle with a 1/16-ounce jig head on it.
Did it start with one color, or was there multiple colors?
They had a lot of colors. They had a lot of colors, you know, because Chuck was always messing around with colors. Chuck was really flip-tail worms had a blue worm, and Chuck, you know, he would constantly have all kinds of magic markers with him, and he started painting this blue worm with a red magic marker, and it made a root beer colored worm. And man, that thing was back. This was back maybe 1970 when he made this. Chuck died in 1973, but I think it was about 1970. And man, we were burning fish up with that root beer colored worm. But it was a flip tail, you know. And we went through lots of magic markers, just changing them around. And, you know, that's before we knew you could buy magic marker ink, and maybe, you know, but it was really dynamite. And it was, you know, then Chuck was a fanatic with jig spinners, and Nick was fishing a jig spinner today on a Z-Man TRD Tickler Z, weren't you?
Yeah.
And you know, I don't use them anymore, but Chuck just loved them. He fished them with a Bayou Boogie on a head Sonic and all kinds. He used it all the time, all kinds of different things. But he started making the beetle spin. And for many years, the beetle spin was one of the best-selling lures in the history of fishing. And it's still somewhat popular. But Chuck didn't make a dime on it. You know, for some, you know, he died in a veterans hospital, just rotten poor. You know, he just didn't have a dime to his name. You know, so it's, you know, it's really kind of heartbreaking story. I don't know. You know, Harold Inslee, you know, thought he was just. We'll get to this page here. Thought this is the best bait in history he ever used. You know, it was a public record, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Okay, and then the fourth one, we've already mentioned that was the Roadrunner. That was, you know, the underspin. That was made in 1958. And Bert Hall made it. And he tried to use Chuck's a beetle spin and put a spin on a barbecue jig, and he kept on getting it all, a thing called fouled up, and he decided to make it with a underspin on it, and it, you know, kind of set the world on fire in a lot of ways. And then we're going to go back to old Harold Inslee here. We have one here. No, we don't. Anybody here of the Reaper? Anybody know what the Reaper is?
I do not.
Nobody? Okay. This was made in I'm going to pass it. I didn't have any more left. I used to have hundreds of them, but I sold everything out like last years ago. I'm 85, and we're trying to get rid of all the stuff that we have. And the Reaper was made in 1963, and at that time he and Virgil Ward had split up. They kind of quit talking because Virgil got a TV show and they were in competition, and I don't know what happened, but they never spoke to each other to their dying day. And so it really was, it's been a heartbreaking thing for Billy Ward, the brother. It's the son, but it's just what happened. And what Harold did was the Wards used to go up to Canada and use a half-ounce waterproof jig. And Harold, they made a lot of TV shows up there catching lake trout, and they were just fishing vertically 50, 60 feet of water with these big marabou jigs. And it was really, they caught oodles of lake trout. I don't know how many, but they made a lot of TV shows. And Harold caught one day that regurgitated a smelt. So he wanted to make a bait that kind of looked like a smelt. If you turned it so, these reaper baits are shown they're flat like this, but when he rigged them, they would be like this, the tail wobble. And he made them in 2-inch, 3-inch, and I think it was about 4.5. It could be about 5. And so Chuck Woods, was good friends. He got kind of gone on the other side of the Virgil War because he wasn't making any money on the beetle, I guess. So he became friends with Harold, but he couldn't catch any fish on the beetle. I mean, on the reaper. So as you see the tail on the reaper, he started at Fink's tackle shop, started cutting out with razor blade the puddle jumper, and the puddle jumper was really the first, in my mind, the first creature bait in the history of our fishing. It is still being made. It's made down now in northern Arkansas. Somebody's making it. It's still really a tremendous fishing, like the White River, in the Current River, places like that. It's still very, very effective. And they made them in Northern Lure Company, Ted Green again, started making these things, and then they sold it out. But it was really a wow revolve. It's a tremendous. That's what Midwest fishing is really about. Essentially baits like that on a 16th ounce, even 8th ounce head, sometimes on the 3/32 ounce head. There's a 4-inch, there's a 4-inch, and there's a 2.5, and then there's that 3/8 inch and a half, so 1 3/4. And still in Minnesota, this is the best crappie bait they have in a lot of tackle shops. It's just normal. And it came out of Fink's Tackle over in Southwest Boulevard, and then Northern Lure picked it up. So
from a reaper originally.
From a reaper original, yeah. And about the same time that he made this, Chuck's getting old. He's 70 years old, and this is 1971. He made what we call the first shaky head jig. It was a Texas break one. It was an aspirin head jig. You guys know what an aspirin head jig is? It's like an aspirin, and it's. I got one here. You guys can find it. Oh boy. Yeah. I got it. And this is an aspirin head jig, but so you can just pass it around and see what it looks like. And the eye of the hook was up above the aspirin head quite a ways, so you could penetrate the body of the worm on top of that, and then the eye was here, and the Texas rig he had that on about a 2-aught hook. And Ray Fink got equal for to make the hook for him. And so this was the very first, what we know of, was the very first real shaky head like that. And man, you could just shake the heck out of that bait, And most guys just didn't realize how great an invention that thing was. Okay. So we've gone from the puddle holder to the first Texas rig thing. And then we got spinning rods. And spinning rods were used in Kansas City area by Virgil Ward, Harold Inslee, and things like this back in the 1950s. And it was the ruler. They called us, you know, sissy fishing. That's what they always called us, sissy fishing. Our crappie fishing for bass, you know, it was just we were ridiculed in a lot of ways because we were power fishermen too, but we really liked to catch fish like this way. So spinning rods really became a very important part. And Ray Fink he was a fly fisherman. He made fly rods all of his life. His father made fly rods, and so he got into spinning tackle too. And he made what rod we call the Stinger. Started making it in the 1960s, which Dwight Kiefer took the Stinger rod up to Wisconsin when he was a sophomore here in 1968 and won the world championship of fishing. He won a race, 5'4", 5.5" rods, and after a while, people from all over the world started finding out a little bit about how great Ray Fink plays, and the world got. People just started coming in here, and a guy named Gary Loomis, you know, Loomis Rods, everybody know Loomis Rods? Gary Loomis walks in and says, hey, I hear you got a rod called the Stinger. He said, yeah, I hear you. He says, oh, let me see it. And he said, oh, I want to fly you back out to Washington with you. We want to make one of these things. So Ray flew out to Washington, and he, where is it? Let me see. Over here? Okay.
I think he's still
And this is the this is the rod that Loomis made. They made them up until about 2015. And Shimano bought them out and said, no, we don't need anything like this with a cork handle, and where you have to tape the thing to it, you know. And this is a Ray Fink Stinger rod. And it's actually a spin jig rod, and they sold, you know, quite a few of them. And it's really we lived on this rod. It's 5 feet 4 inches long, and my friend, we named him Drew Reese, who lives at Rantoul and is up at Lake of the Woods right now. He broke his last one about 5 years ago. Man, we didn't have, you know, nothing else, you know, so he looked all over the world and found some guys down in Florida who were really rod experts and stuff. And they kind of worked together to build the rod up. And they got together and we all got together and worked on it and thought about it, and we built a prototype. And Drew's a really a good salesman. And he talked to Daniel Nussbaum, who's the head of Seaman, think about making one for us, you know, so we can have one to fish with. But this is a sample of the kind of rods we used starting back in the 1970s with the Stinger rod, and that's. And then we lived on that type of stuff. So and so that is really then having a lightweight spinning rod has been really the heart of the Midwest finesse fishing. And most people think it's too, you know, still they think it's too short. You know, like Marty, you'll hear he fishes big rods, you know. And it's great. You can catch he catches a hell of a lot of fish, thousands of fish, you know. But we're just kind of you know, sissy fishing down here, you know, and yeah.
So what do you attach that with? Like is there a rod tape that you use?
Yeah, I just vinyl tape. Yeah, I'll show you. Right now. No, let's pass these around.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
And then what's your hookup ratio on these? Like as far as like losing fish, I mean the smaller ones, or
Well, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Well, today we were fishing without a barb too,
We don't,
right?
I take barbs off my hooks.
I was using that rod right there because I wanted to use one of his rods
Yeah.
to learn on it.
So-
And honestly, I enjoyed it just because, I mean, it's a lot more fun to fight with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you can see.
Well, it loads up more, so like, I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
feel like the fish is going to come off as much, but I did lose a couple, but I think it might have just been the fact that we don't have any barb, there's nothing to keep
It's
them
almost
on.
as light as like a hair.
Yeah, if they're gonna jump, I mean,
If they jump, they have a good chance of getting off.
sure, when I used, I used to go watch all the big pros fish. I used to be in their boat for 8 to 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
And, they lose fish, just like you and I lose fish, and it's just,
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are, and they think it's their fault when they lose one, but, I mean, if they ain't gonna fish, it's,
Things happen.
yeah. So you can feel how light that rod is. I mean, that's just like a feather almost. Okay. And this is what the rod. This is a 5-4. That's a 510. And this is what the rod with the reel on now. This is how we do it.
Bruise rod, right?
Yeah, brewery is.
I don't know if you had gotten to that part, but like, then he talked to Z-Man, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
electric take on.
So the lowest rod was called a spin jig rod, and then we got these rods here. And these rods are now about 3 years old. Okay, and lure number 10 is the gator bug. Do we have a gator bug up there? Yeah. There we go. Well, I'll send a puddle jumper around here so you guys can see a puddle jumper too in your hand. Okay, the next bait was 1977, and it was the first plastic crawfish ever made. And it was made by Dion Hickman, Gato's son, in Versailles, Missouri High School. He was a freshman in high school in Versailles, Missouri, in his science class. And this was a science project, and he used a live crawdad to make a soft plastic bait with. And this is we ended up calling it the Gato bug. And the Gato bug this was the first crawdad or soft plastic crawdad in the history of the world in 1977. The Hibden family were all guides on the Lake of the Ozarks. They had 3 sons. Big Gate, we called him Big Gate. His name was Gato Senior, and Little Gate was Gato, the guy who was the Bassmaster Classic winner and stuff. And for years and years, 1930s, 40s, and 50s, they fished with a split shot rig and with a crayfish on, a live crayfish. They used to go through hundreds of crayfish a week, And some weeks they might even go up to 1,000 because there were 3 of them guiding, and they were catching channel cat and bass and spotted bass on it. And it was just a number 2 eagle claw bait hook, and a split shot about 12 inches in front of it. The split shot was maybe an 1/8 of an ounce or a 1/16 of an ounce, and it was and that's what they did. And then in this book here, they're kind of insisting, in a way, I'm exaggerating, that a split shot rig was developed in California, but hell, the Hibdens were using it back in the 1930s in the Lake of the Ozarks for crawdads. And then in the 1960s, when the worm got to being kind of popular, Trey, one of the sons of one of the brothers of Gato, started putting a plastic worm on a crawfish thing, and that was it. But Dion and Gato made the craw because Gato wanted a plastic crawfish, and Dion made it. This is 1977, and they fished that thing on jig heads all over the United States. And especially, Kehde was a great sight fisherman. He had tremendous eyes. He could see largemouth bass and smallmouth bass. We'd go down. I'd be fishing with him. We were both guides at the same time, we'd go fishing. We'd be going down the bank, and my God, he could see fish everywhere, you know. And I'd come up and I could try to see him, and this is before I had Polaroid glasses and anything. It was just amazing. And he could sit up there and he could watch that fish come in and look at his bait. A lot of times we were fishing with live crawdads, and it was just a sight to see. And when he got to be a bass fisherman, the Ranger Ranger sponsored him, and his whole thing was to make extremely silent boat. He would never have any sonar equipment on. Sometimes he wouldn't even put his trolling motor down. He would just drift down there and just looking at the time, and he would just pitching. We're using spinning tackle too at that time. Now we're having a talk. You want to talk about fishing? Okay. So, okay, that was number 10. Now I just want to go quickly about here are some guys that actually really made a difference besides us in the Midwest. We got to add to Bobby Garland and his Gidget, which was the too big, the very first too big. And actually, how we got to it, Guido was fishing a tournament out at Lake Mead. You know, it's a classic tournament out there in August out at Lake Mead. All the big wackos and great fishermen used to go out fishing. And he got paired with Bobby Garland. And Bobby Garland, you know, was a tube man. And Guido had never seen it before. And in Lake Mead, when in the heat of the summer, a lot of times the bass come out and get in the shade of your boat. And the water was so clear out there, you could actually see them. And Bobby got away fishing about 1/32 ounce jig head on one of his Gidgets, which is a tube. He would just pitch it out there and let it kind of pivotal back, and those fish would boom, just kind of swallow it up, and you could see the whole thing. And so Guido just fell in love with it, you know, because this sight fishing thing was just up Guido's alley. And so he started bringing back, Bobby gave him a whole bunch of stuff like that, because Guido had, you know, was gotten to be a pretty famous fisherman. He would come out there Lake Mead and live for about 3 weeks before the tournament, just so he could get used to it. And so he brought the Gidget back, and the Gidget became, and Guido started making him there, and then he became one of the renowned tube fishermen in the Midwest and in the East Coast. He just went all around. They started, you know, fishing tubes for catching bass on spawning beds and all kinds of things. So Guido taught me how to tube fish, and you know, I got hooked on it, something fierce too. You know, and so I haven't thrown a tube now in 3 years. So I've not broken, but it still works. I guess I've got a lot of friends that still do it. And then I got to talk to one more by Conrad Peterson. He lived in around Nisswa, Minnesota, where I used to be. When I was in high school, I was a fishing guide in Nisswa up around Brainerd. And Conrad, I knew him a little bit then, but I was 15 years old, and he was a little bit older than I was. And he made the gopher head jig, the mushroom head jig, and then I forgot about it. But then I was fishing with Ron Linder, Alan and Ron Linder, who are in fisherman guys. Ron showed me we were fishing the lac and fishing. He was fishing a jig worm on the lac for smallmouth. And he showed me this thing, and I said, God, man, this is something else. So the gopher jig became a really big deal. And then Z-Man, their gopher went broke, and Z-Man started making it, and I got hooked up with getting Z-Man to make them, you know. And now I'm using a different Z-Man than the gopher, but the mushroom jig by Conrad was just a major addition to our fishing. And then we got Rick Wolf, who in 1972 made the Mr. Twister. He was from Louisiana. The grub, and the grub is always a big deal. The 3-inch grub, 3.5-inch grub, and we're using 2.5-inch. But he was outside our area, but the grub came up and got into Table Rock Lake and it worked its way up here, and it really made a major part of our deal.
What year did you say?
1972.
72.
Yeah. And then Tom Mann from Alabama, he he was, you know, he was the jelly worm guy, and stingray grub. The stingray grub that Man Lure Company made was Drew Reed's White Keeper and I used to fish on piers on bridges with the stingray grub, just casting it out and let it swing past each pier. Or like today, we're fishing cables on those buoys, and Gato and I and stuff with it, we'd throw that stingray grub out and let it go down, just swim by it, and it was really great. And actually, Tom Mann fished the first Bassmaster Classic with Drew, and they and the guy from Forsyth, Missouri, I can't remember who was using the road runner, were the only 3 guys in the Classic that year that had spinning rods. You know, they were harassed a little bit about using spinning rods, you know. So. And then here he comes, Charlie Brewer. Okay, Charlie Brewer, the Brewer Lure Company. You know, he's the slider fishing in the Tennessee handle. He makes rods a little shorter than we use, but it's and he was fishing for a long time with that stuff. You know, he taught Billy Westmoreland a little bit about that too. Billy Westmoreland fished in the Classic with Kehde and stuff like that. He used with cork handle rods like we did. The Bass Pro Shop used to make them. You know, Billy Westmoreland rods for a long time, and they were 5'10" and 6 feet. You know, they were really great rods, but like, you know, nobody wants to use that stuff anymore, you know, so, except for us wackos here, like me, you know, and so Billy Westmoreland. And the last guy that made a really difference in my life is a guy named Shin Fukai. Shin's a Japanese fisherman, and he's still fishing the FLW circuit. Back in Gato Hibben, Gato was such a great finesse fisherman that the Japanese loved him. And they would take him over Daiwa. He became sponsored by Daiwa. Daiwa would fly him over and he'd show the Japanese people about finesse fishing, you know, essentially over there. And so when Shin got here to the United States, started traveling around, Gato and his wife Stella and Dion, they kind of adopted them, you know, and he and his wife. And so Gato fixed me up on April 1st, 2006 to go down and I used to work for In Fisherman magazine, and I used to sit in the back of the boat all day and watch all these pros like Shin and Dion and Aaron Martins and Billy Martin and Stacy, all the guys that used to fish, you know, back in the 1990s and 2000s. I used to write about them for In Fisherman. I just sit back and watch them fish all day, you know. And so I went with Shin, and it was the most astonishing 12 hours of my life to watch a guy fish the way Gato and I used to fish, you know. He was fishing with a bait that Gary Yamamoto made. It wasn't available in the United States. It was called a shad-shaped worm. It was only made for the Japanese angler. And it looks like, you remember the Finesse Jig we passed around? Right. It's similar to the Finesse Jig. It's just a little bit thicker and stuff like that. But we tried to get Z-Man to make the Finesse Jig worm, to make the shad-shaped worm, and they didn't make it. They had this one that was being made in Australia. Z-Man is also in Australia, so they started doing it. And the Finesse Jig works very well. We caught a couple of fish on it today. I caught a couple of fish on it today too. I haven't used it for a while, but it was today. But I caught a few on it. So, but Shin Fukai, he was fishing the FLW tournament in Beaver, and I watched him fish for 12 hours that day, and it was unbelievable. This guy was making a cast, and retrieving, and it was incessant shake, and he knew. At least he told, and I think so, just watching, he would try to keep that bait 6 to 12 inches off the bottom all the time. And just shake, and kind of reel. His concentration was so intense. It was just, you know, just remarkable just how he could concentrate. And he that day, he was using a redhead on it, and we'll talk about redhead in a second, but it was just quite quite amazing. And he ended up winning that tournament. He won $250,000 in that tournament. And what he had a woman was one of his draw partners. She said, I called her to interview her afterwards. I said, what was fishing like with Shin? He said, it was mesmerizing. She said, I just was astonished what took place. And then Shin made a real difference in my life. We became pretty good friends. And I was telling Marty today, but he's going to talk to you pretty soon about Neko Rigs. The next year, I met him down there again at Beaver, and that was the first Neko Rig I've ever seen in my life, you know. And I never did really ever use them. And Marty showed me today. I said, man, you got to use this stuff. You can invest in a lot of stuff. But it was just too complicated for me to do, you know. But Marty's got the science down. He'll tell you all about how to do it. So that Shin made a big difference in my life, and that's my only Japanese connection with Finesse Jig. So that's kind of the history of it.
Where's Shin live at now?
He lives in Texas, and he lives also part-time for a while he didn't go back, and he was living. I think he's a U.S. citizen now.
Okay.
But he has a wife, and she's a darling lady too. And she gets in the boat. She went in the boat with us one day, and she just she helped translate. When he was over the first time, he had a cell phone that could translate Japanese into English, you know, and so it was really a remarkable. It was, you know, it was an outstanding deal. So I'm gonna let Marty get up here because I've been taking too long. But we'll talk a little bit later about if you want. You guys have time, and we'll show you some stuff we do. And
well, did you see these? I don't know if you. I think you covered most of this already, though. Ned Rig Flossy, designed for numbers over size, right?
Oh yeah, I haven't talked about it. Yeah, I'm a numbers fisherman. I'm not a lunker fisherman. You know, I don't mind catching lunkers,
Yeah.
but I want, you know. I want like my grandkids. I says, Grandpa, I want to bite. I want to bite.
Yep.
And so I've been, you know, the older I get, the more kid-like I get, you know. So now that I'm 85, I'm getting more bites, but I'm getting damn fewer bites anymore. I don't know if it's my age is affecting me or
I think the fisheries are affected.
I don't know, but all you guys are fishing too much.
Yeah.
I'm blaming you guys too. So.
There's some water up there for you if you need a drink.
Oh, I'm fine. Okay. So that, yeah, it's simple. Essentially, simple and frugality is in the essence of my life in fishing. You know, I want to be a frugal fisher. I don't have a bass boat anymore. I got rid of all that expensive stuff. I mean, the rods I got are pretty expensive. You know, the $150 rods and stuff like that. But that's about the most expensive thing I do. You know, I use Fireline, and but you know, so but I can show you if you want to see a little bit more stuff afterwards. But I'm going to get Marty up here. Marty, I'm taking too long. Get up here and show them what the right thing to do is.
A little break here for a second.
So you take a break.
Yeah, anybody need a...
Hey, just give him a hand, you guys. There's a test on the history of...
Anybody have any other questions for Ned?
No, you got a question? Yeah.
Also, if you want to take a break, they've got...
I don't want to take a break.
No, I mean, if anybody wants to grab a drink from
Yeah, you want a drink or something?
coffee, beer, water,
those girls that came in
pop.
wanted coffee.
Yeah.
Make sure you get you one. They're really good.
I don't know.
Do you use straight braid or do you use a fluorocarbon leader?
No, you got a leader, so go back. You'll see it all. It's all up here.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have these questions, but basically, you know, he's got a 4 to 6 pound main braid, and then he's got a 4 to 6 foot section of 4 to 6 pound fluorocarbon leader.
And then a cigar knot.
Seaguard knot is his favorite knot for Kansas because of the wind. It's the easiest to tie in the wind.
Okay.
I got one too.
So.
Yeah. I found one the other night. It's just you double over the braid, you double over the fluorocarbon, then you wrap the braid around 7 times, and you tie it like up to the...
Go back some more.
A fishing guide.
Did we cover?
We didn't go to that. Yeah, but that's essentially a different type of retreats we have, guys. And the stroll, forward-facing sonar guys that got the word stroll too. It's different. Trolling is where we're using our trolling motor. We're trolling. essentially.
Yeah, you just combine
That
it.
we can't, you know, when you fish tournaments, you can't troll, fast tournaments, you can't troll. We call it strolling. And we're casting at a 45-degree angle behind the boat. And just going like this. And actually, Rick Clun told me about a story. He was fishing, he was crankbaiting some riprap, and just, the guy in the back of the boat didn't cast because he was casting parallel down the line. So this guy with the Japanese fisherman in the back of the boat, and he was casting back of the boat and strolling and catching more fish than rolling was. He was fishing the jig roll, essentially. And rolling, I was back in my days, and so I was fishing in Midwest Finesse.
Yeah.
And that's why he told me about that story. So that's essentially it. Those are the things we do. And basic drag, we drag a lot. We were dragging today a lot too, you know, it's just kind of mess, when you're not concentrating, you can drag. And
Do you always use an open hook, or do you?
I always use an open hook, yeah. I use number 4 hooks, or just get hung up as much, you know.
Okay.
And, you know, a lot of guys want bigger hooks, because they're fishing for luck or something, you know. So, but I've got my biggest smallmouth is 16.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I have a quarter going.
Really?
Yeah.
Lake Shawnee, Lake
Yeah,
Shawnee?
and
Really?
my next biggest is 6'5", Lake Shawnee.
Wow. Well, they did just shock up that 22-inch.
Yeah, I told them, they didn't realize that we used to have bigger ones back in.
Yeah.
But this was back in 2014, 15.
Wow.
So
there's some big ones there. It's a good winter fishery too for bass.
Sure.
Like Shawnee is.
Because you raise a milk for it. It's not as good as it used to be.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
good.